Again, thank you very much for being here. Good afternoon. When I announced my candidacy for U.S. Senate, one of the issues was ethics and the need to restore voters' confidence in those we elect to public office to represent our great state. Over the last 2 years, we have seen far too many elected officials walk through this building not as government officials, but as defendants on trial for corruption. And that truly needs to change. The recent images of convictions and investigations of our public officials have tarnished Alaska's reputation and our ability to get things done for Alaska families. Alaska needs and deserves elected officials who live by the highest standard of honesty, integrity, and transparency. We need to return back to the days of the public service ethics that helped create our great state, like the ethics of those 55 men and women like Fischer, who is here with me today, that displayed incredible personal dedication when drafting our Constitution. We need to return to when Alaskans were called to public service out of a commitment to serving Alaska's families and building a state for future generations, not for special interest or short-term gain. And that's what I saw when I ran against a young man named Nick Moe for mayor 2 years ago. Nick impressed me from the start because of his clear dedication to building a better Anchorage. In fact, I was so impressed, I hired him as an intern in my office. The only way to restore Alaska's trust in our elected leaders is for those leaders to earn it. We need to return to serving Alaska by the higher standards of ethics, the standards that built this state and will sustain us for greatness for generations to come. When I became mayor of Anchorage, I worked hard to increase the openness of city government by giving more power to boards and commissions, posting funding requests on the city webpage, and giving people more access to the mayor and to the mayor's office. Today, I'm releasing my ethics plan, which is posted on Begich.com, and I pledge to take these Alaskan ethics to the Senate and serve by them from day one. I pledge to Alaskans to go beyond the Senate ethics laws on the books, the laws that, quite frankly, still leave too many loopholes for special interests to gain special access to our public officials. It's time for senators to take personal responsibility on how they conduct their business in the Senate, not just meet the minimum requirement. My Alaska Ethics Pledge is my commitment to serve our state by an Alaskan standard of honesty, openness, and integrity, and ensure Alaska families that they have a senator as independent as Alaska. Here is my pledge. 1. I will make financial records open, detailed, and easily accessible to Alaskans. I won't wait for Congress to shed more sunshine on senators' finances and campaign funding. I will voluntarily post my financial disclosure forms on my Senate website. In fact, last week when I submitted my federal disclosure form, the ranges they had on there were ridiculous. There was so much room for vagueness. Instead of listing my income in broad ranges, which is currently allowed on the Senate rules and the Senate disclosure forms, ranges sometimes as wide as $20 million, I will show to the dollar my income of that of myself and my wife. As of today, you will find on my campaign website my federal disclosure report form, as well as my Alaska Public Offices Commission forms that I've had since 1988 and filed every single year since then. It even includes years that I wasn't an elected official. I served on boards and commissions during those times, and I believe my financial disclosures as a senator will be permanently available to Alaskans, not destroyed after 6 years. And they will be in the format that Alaskans can easily access and search, not a form that you can only download after signing into office in Washington, D.C. 2. I will ban secret meetings, secret earmarks, and hidden favors and connections. From day one, I will post my daily Senate office schedule on my website so every Alaskan can see who I am meeting with in Washington, D.C., working for Alaska families, not special interests. I will make public every earmark I seek and who will benefit, and any request of earmark that comes to me formally or informally, or former staff person that is lobbying Congress. And I will also not allow any former staff who becomes a lobbyist to come back and lobby me over any issue. 3, I will oppose special Senate privileges. I will work to make senators more accountable for their actions. Here's just one example. I won't support automatic pay raises, but will insist that every pay raise is considered out in the open. Why should Alaskans care about Senate pay raises? Because the past 10 years, the Senate has gotten 8 pay raises while only raising the minimum wage once. And that truly is not fair or right. When a pay raise vote comes up, I will not support it unless there is a vote to increase the minimum wage. 4, I provide timely and complete campaign financial records. I will join the few senators currently in office that are filing their campaign contribution reports electronically. Both the presidential and House candidates are required to file their campaign reports electronically, but the Senate still clings to paper, partly because I believe it slows down the public access and makes close examination of their campaign records much more difficult. And finally, I will give Alaskans straight answers and more access. Wait for that traffic there. I've always been an open book, whether it's filing my financial disclosures, opening city government to more citizen participation, or simply engaging Alaskans on talk radio or blogs, or even at the grocery store, or even last night, as an example. As mayor, I learned that you have to make a lot of tough decisions, but I've always been straightforward, even when it's an unpopular decision. This will not change when I enter the Senate. I will continue to give Alaskans straight answers, not hide behind high-priced lawyers or the Senate Ethics Committee. It's a long way between Alaska and Washington, D.C., but I pledge to close the gap by keeping my practices of engaging Alaskans on the radio, through the internet, and by abiding by a strong, open-door policy in my office. Alaskans will not have to hire well-heeled lobbyists to meet with me. My door will be open, and my staff and I will meet with any Alaskan on any issue. This is my commitment to Alaskans. It is a commitment to earn their trust by serving with honesty and integrity, a commitment to a culture of openness and transparency. When I was traveling around the state considering a run for the U.S. Senate, I ran into an elder, and he gave me, I thought, some great advice. He had this piece of advice for me. Keep it simple. On ethics, it's really simple. Treat Alaskans with respect, respect their vote, and respect the office you are supposed to use to help Alaska families, not special interests and not for any personal gain. These are the steps I pledge to take if I'm fortunate enough to earn the votes of Alaskans to serve them in the U.S. Senate. These are the steps that every public official should serve by, whether required by law or not. These are standards I will serve from day one. What I'd like to do at this time, I'll ask Vic to say a few comments, then I'll ask Nick to say a few comments, and then I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mark. I'm really honored to be here. I'm glad that Mark mentioned the Constitutional Convention and the level of standards and openness that it set. It was an amazing exercise in democracy. We had fabulous leadership, the kind that Mark has shown as mayor, running an open government and leadership that transcended party politics. This is something that I think is very crucial, particularly in this day and age. We've had so many years, so many decades of one-sided, very divided government that has stymied the operations of democratic government, and in particular, we have seen this when one-party rule has trampled over all opposition of all consideration of issues. This was not the way the Constitutional Convention was run. This is not the way a city or state or federal government should be run. I have tremendous faith in Mark running an open government. He demonstrated this in his years as mayor, and I'm sure that he will demonstrate it in Washington, D.C. I've been concerned with respect to one-sided government that there's not enough consideration of a balance that is traditional in American policy, especially in foreign affairs. Alaska had a goal in statehood, and that was voting representation in the U.S. Senate. We started off with two great senators. They were both Democrats. It was a time when we had a Democratic president, and it was one-sided, and we did not necessarily have total evenness. We went through a short period when we had a Republican senator and a Democratic senator, and then we had decades of two Republican senators. I have tremendous respect for Ted Stevens. I think he's done a great job over the decades for Alaska. At the same time, I think that it is time to make sure that our representation in the U.S. Senate is such that we can talk to senators on both sides of the aisle, and Mark is the kind of senator who will be with us, I hope, for a long time. We have a U.S. senator who's on the Republican side who has shown a high degree of independence, just as I expect Mark would show in Washington, D.C., and the pledge that he's made with respect to openness and responsiveness to the Alaska electorate is something that I think will serve Alaska well and will make a tremendous difference in the U.S. Senate. So I just want to say that I'm strongly in support of Mark's candidacy, and I hope that he will succeed because he will make a difference in this world. Thank you.
I have to say this one comment. When we were on the campaign trail a couple of years ago, we would show up at these events, and we would do our 1 minute or 2 minute or whatever the presentation was, and I had never met Nick until that campaign came forward. And one thing I really truly admired by him, he was quick to grasp the issues, willing to step out there and talk about how he felt about the issues. He was not bashful, and because of that, after I won my election, I literally turned to him and I said, I want to bring you aboard because that's the kind of person that represents the new Alaska, the new generation of leadership, a very independent view, but also recognizes the importance of being straightforward in his answers and how he dealt with things. So let me introduce Nick Moe.
Thank you, Mark. And that is, Alaska has a great opportunity for a new kind of leadership, one that puts ethics first instead of thinking about them later. 2 years ago, I ran against Mayor Begich, and during that time, we differed on the issues here and there. But one thing you couldn't argue with him about is his ethics. I think in that whole 5-month campaign, ethics didn't even come up. Now today it's a different story. Obviously ethics are on the top of many people's minds, and rightfully so. We've had numerous investigations in the state and on the federal level, and trust in government has been strongly shaken. And shortly after the election, I was grateful to come aboard Mark's team and work on recycling projects and move recycling forward in Anchorage. We did everything from business recycling to energy efficiency plans to one plan in particular, which was the comprehensive recycle plan. And in that, there was an extensive public process, an open and transparent from the base of brainstorming the plan all the way to the desk of the assembly members. This plan remained open and transparent all the way through. And for example, we had numerous town hall meetings, where hundreds of people would show up and get there. We would get their input, come back, critique the plan. This happened 2 or 3 times. We had surveys where, thousands of the public would come, input, see the plan where it's at, and then come back and be able to input on it. And, we also set up a blog where we can have an open exchange of information between the public and the government, so they can know where we're at and we could get direct feedback from them right there electronically. Throughout this whole plan, it remained an open and transparent process. It may have taken a little bit longer than we would have liked, but, we made sure we did it right the first time, and it was a product that we could be proud of. And this is just one example of, I think, the leadership that Mark Begich has proved, at least to me, that is strong in ethics and in a public process, that, that you do it right the first time, so you don't have to go back and critique it. Now, all in all, Mayor Begich has proved to me that he has the trust needed to restore trust in government. He has the ethics needed to restore trust in government.
I'll be happy to take some questions if folks have them, and I know, and I'm assuming, Julie, you passed out the document too on the full plan. I'm happy to take some questions if folks have them.
The first mention of Senator Stevens came from Mr. Fischer. Obviously, your presence here, the references to the investigations, are obviously alluding to the troubles that Senator Stevens is facing legally. Why not just come out four square and address the degree to which you think he's compromised by this investigation?
Well, I think the real issue is, and this is what I, at least, and Vic can speak for himself, but from my perspective, when I traveled around that early stages of the exploratory committee, what people were saying to me, and it wasn't about specific individuals, maybe some at times would say specifics, but they just felt like this whole system that we are under right now is not as open as it could be, has some issues with how elected officials, former and current, have been handling their business. And people have told me over and over again, not just here in Anchorage, not just in Bethel or Kotzebue, but literally around this country, that people want something different in the sense of how we will do the business of the day. You can take that from, if it's Ted or Don or some other person, but the way I look at it is a principle that it doesn't matter if you're running for this office, you're running for a city council office or an assembly, or as the presidential people are running, it's an issue of ethics that people are demanding, and a much more disclosure, much more open. So I look at it, it's not about an individual, it's about what people really want to see in their government, more than they have ever stated before. I mean, you hear once in a while about campaign reform, you hear those issues. But what people have been telling me, especially in the last year, anybody running for any office has to have better and higher standards than ever before. It's why we rewrote our ethics code on the local level, about a year and a half ago. People were demanding a much more open and transparent way to do the business. So I think it's not relevant of who, it's what the public is demanding, and I think it's the right thing.
I would just add to that we've had several years now of accusations, disclosures, convictions, and so on. And the bad taste has not yet been removed, because the appearance of wrongdoing is very often as destructive as actual wrongdoing. And I think that, as Mark said earlier, there's distrust, there's bad feeling about government, and I think that it's necessary for all candidates, for all public officials, to lean over backward to make sure that there is no appearance, there's no suspicion, there's no aura of impropriety around them.
And I'll just give you one more example. And I've seen these forms, disclosure forms from years ago. They really haven't changed much. An example that I was somewhat shocked that was in there was I put my income, and then I get to put my wife's. And all I have to do is check one box, and the box says she makes more than $1,000. That's it. It doesn't describe in detail of any kind. I just think that alone, doesn't matter who I'm running against, the system has to change. For you not to be able to go online and pull down a disclosure form to find out where they make their money, who they have in their family making money, is amazing that you can't do that. You can do it for the House, you can do it for the presidential, but you can't do it for the Senate. and again, it doesn't matter who I'm running against, there needs to be some additional reforms and streamline this to the point where the public has more disclosure, more opportunity to see what people are doing. I know when I've looked at Senate finances in regards to campaign contributions, it is almost impossible. You get these booklets this thick, and you have to go through each one. But if I wanted to do a sort, just kind of find out what industries and lobbyists, that's almost impossible to do. That is just unacceptable under any circumstance. And so from a local level, I recognize, when someone asks me how long have I been filing public disclosure documents, and I said, well, I have them all the way back to 1988. And they said, what? And I said, absolutely. From the day I ran for assembly to this time serving in the mayor's office, I have disclosure forms for every single year. Not after 6 years they're destroyed, they're kept. And I think the system has to change out. And I think ethics, transparency, and access to your government is one of the big issues that people have come to me about in this election.
You mentioned people hiding behind their lawyers. Forgive the question, but who were you talking about?
Well, I think everyone that's come through this door has had a lawyer. I've never used a lawyer in any situation of an APOC or anything like that. And over the years, through campaigns, people have thrown stuff at me, and I just go right out there and tell them like it is. What people get with me, I don't hide behind folks. Sometimes I get criticized by some of my folks that work for me off and on that I'm too accessible. When someone criticizes or has a concern about a policy or a personal issue or anything around my campaign, I'm first out. I get right out there, maybe on a blog, maybe on the radio. I don't have to have a person to speak for me. You get what you get. And I don't think there's ever been a time, and I say this from just my recollection, I don't think there's ever been a time that you've ever gotten from me no comment. You ask me a question, I'm going to tell you. Sometimes you may not like that answer. Sometimes it may not be politically the wisest thing to say, but you're always going to get an answer from me. And I just don't do it. I mean, you get what you get with me. And that's a difference. I mean, this door has been a revolving door with a bunch of attorneys representing people who have been found guilty. And in reality, they were guilty. They should fess up, be accountable, and deal with it. I'm just a different person when it comes to these things.
When you say the two of them have hid behind their lawyers thus far, certainly they haven't said a word.
Well, I think they haven't said, as well as other elected officials or former elected officials haven't said much about their issues. And I think, the view is you should step up to the plate. Any other questions?
I mean, it seems like you're trying to preserve some deniability that you're ever attacking Ted Stevens. While you're setting, in this building, Bill Allen talked about the renovations on Senator Stevens' home in Bergman. Okay, here you are. You are running a specific race. You're not running a general race. You're running a race that does have a specific incumbent. Why would you mention his name in the context of these issues you're bringing?
Again, I'll say it. I'll probably say this throughout the campaign. I have this feeling because this is the question you like ask in every meeting, but it's okay. It's fair. And that is, under any circumstances, it doesn't matter who I'm running against. The system doesn't work. It's not fully disclosed. People do not disclose, in my view, what the public demands today. And we have to improve it. In order for the federal government, the state government, local government to do a better job, to respond to the people that they serve, in my case, the Alaska families, we have to be way out there in the sense of our disclosure levels. And what it seems to be, when you're in local government, you expose all of it. As you go up the ladder, it discloses less. And I think that's where it should be even more, because you're so far away from the voter. You're so far away and disconnected from the day-to-day operations that you should be even, as you said, bend over backwards to really make sure everything is out in the open, even more so. An example, when we have executives that have left here from my workplace, if they don't come back and lobby me on issues, they just don't do it. They're restricted to a period of time, and also it's just not right. So I think from a long-term viewpoint, you look at this list of items, it doesn't matter who the opponent is. And, for those issues you're bringing up, you should, as I've said to you before, you need to talk with those guys. From my perspective, the system has to change up. It's what the public is demanding from a variety of reasons.
Let me just add to that. One of the things I admire about Mark is his ability to answer questions like that. But beyond that is that he is running for something. He's not running against any individual per se. TED has been an institution in Alaska, and I don't think that Mark's election campaign can properly be run to tear down the edifice that Ted Stevens has become. Mark is running a positive campaign, trying to get votes on the basis of the future, what he can provide in the future, what changes are desirable, and I admired him for that.
And I guess I'd add one more last piece to that. That's the cargo planes going to Anchorage International Airport. 640 of them fly every week, 26 different countries, providing the third busiest cargo hub in the world. But that was a little buy commercial.
It's actually factual.
It's factual, absolutely. Yes, we are the third busiest cargo hauler. The thing that I've always looked at is, there's a lot of people who will throw rocks, complain, and I appreciate what you just said there, Vic, because what I look at is, what are the challenges that Alaska families are talking about? What are the issues that they've brought forward? They've brought forward the issues of ethics and transparency. Now, I could throw rocks and complain, but instead what I like to do is say, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to move forward. There's a history, but there's a future, and that's what we need to look toward. That's a different style than some. I think campaigns of the past are, what can you do to tear down the other guy? My view is, and I ran my last campaign that way, campaign before that I ran that way, was what do I offer and what do I bring forward? And every time you'll hear about an issue from me, I'm just not going to complain about it. I'm going to talk about here's what I want to do to make a difference. Because at the end of the day, people want to vote for something. They want to vote for a future. And I think in this situation, I've heard over and over again from Alaska families that they want to see a more open, accessible, transparent federal bureaucracy, federal government. And so I have taken upon myself to lay out a 5-point plan to say, here's how we're going to do it, folks. Here's how we're going to go from point A to point B. Other questions? If not, thank you for coming out on a sunny day this time. I think last time I saw you it was a blizzard and a snowstorm. But thank you all very much, and if there's any additional questions later, let me know and I'll be happy to respond. And we do have these items posted on the website right now. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, Suzanne, correct me if I'm wrong here, but our disclosure forms, because the way the federal rules work, even though they are due May 15th, you actually won't see them on the federal system for another month. But we have put ours out now because no difference in APOC. When you send yours in at APOC, it's available right then. On the federal system, they even delayed another 30 days. So we're not doing that. It's posted. It's available for response and review. Thank you all very much.